7 years ago, a student came to me and asked me to invest in his company. He said, "I'm working with 3 friends and we're going to try to disrupt an industry by selling products online." I said, "Well, you guys spent all summer on this, right?" "No, we all got internships, just in case the project didn't work out." "Okay, but you'll be free to do this right after graduation." "Not quite. No, we've all booked backup jobs." 6 months have passed. It's the day before the company's launch, and their website still doesn't exist. Did you know that the entire company is a website? That's it. So of course, I declined the investment. They ended up calling the company Warby Parker. They sell eyeglasses online. They were recently ranked the most innovative company in the world, and they were valued at over $1 billion. Now, my wife manages our investments. Why was I so wrong? To find out, I studied people I consider innovative. Creators are unconventional people who don't just come up with new ideas, they take the initiative to support them. They stand out and speak out. Creators are the ones who drive creativity and change in the world. They're the people you want to bet on, and they're not what you expected. Today, I want to share with you 3 things I've learned about recognizing and emulating original characters. So, the number 1 reason I didn't choose Warby Parker was because it was slow to get off the ground. Making it work. By now, you're all too familiar with the procrastinator's mindset. Well, I have a confession to make. I'm the complete opposite. I'm a procrastinator. Yes, that's a valid term. You know that panic you feel a few hours before a big deadline when you haven't completed anything yet? I felt it as early as just a few months ago. It started early. As a kid, I was really into Nintendo games. I would wake up at 5 a.m., start playing, and not stop until I mastered them. Eventually, things got so out of hand that a local newspaper published a report on Nintendo's dark side, and I was the star of the article. Since then, I've grown more mature, but this served me well at university, as I finished my thesis 4 months ahead of its deadline.
And I was proud of that, until a few years ago when a student named Ji Hai came to me and said, "My most creative ideas come to me when I procrastinate." I said, "That's cute. Where are those 4 pieces of paper you owe me?" No, she was one of our most creative students, and, as an organizational psychologist, that's the kind of idea I test. So I challenged her to gather some data. She went to a number of companies and asked employees to fill out surveys about how often they procrastinated. Then, she asked her bosses to rate their creativity and innovation. And indeed, people like me, who rush to get things done early, are rated as less creative than people who procrastinate moderately. So I wanted to know what happens to chronic procrastinators. She said, "I don't know, they didn't complete a survey." No, these are our results. In fact, she finds that people who wait until the last minute are wasting their time, idling, to the point where they don't have any new ideas. On the other hand, racers are so anxious that they lack creative ideas. It seems like there's an ideal place for creative people to live. Why? Maybe creative people have bad work habits. Maybe it's because procrastination doesn't lead to creativity. To find out, we designed some experiments. We asked people to come up with new business ideas. Then we used independent raters to rate their creativity and usefulness. Some were asked to complete the task immediately, while others were randomly assigned to procrastinate by having Minesweeper held up in front of them for 5 or 10 minutes. Indeed, moderate procrastinators were 16% more creative than the other 2 groups. Minesweeper is great, but it's not the main factor behind this effect. Because if you play the game first, before you're familiar with the task, there's no boost to creativity. Only when you're told you're going to work on this problem, and then you start procrastinating while the task is still fresh in your mind, do you start preparing. Procrastination gives you time to consider divergent ideas, think in non-linear ways, and make unexpected leaps. So, while we were completing these experiments, I started writing a book about creative people. I figured this was the perfect time to teach myself to procrastinate, while also writing a chapter about it. So, I procrastinated twice as much. Like any self-respecting procrastinator, I woke up early the next morning and made a to-do list detailing the steps involved in procrastinating. And I worked hard to achieve my goal, which was to make no progress toward it. I started writing the chapter on procrastination, and one day, halfway through, I literally stopped mid-sentence for months. It was incredibly painful. But when I got back to writing, I had new and varied ideas. As Aaron Sorkin said, you call it procrastination, I call it thinking. And along the way, I discovered that many of history's great creative pioneers were procrastinators. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for example. He worked intermittently for 16 years on the Mona Lisa. He felt like a failure. He wrote a lot in his journal, but some of the preoccupations he practiced with optics changed the way he modeled light and made him a much better painter. What about Martin Luther King Jr.? The night before his most important speech of his life, the March on Washington, he woke up after 3 a.m. to rewrite it. While he sat in the audience, waiting for his turn to go on stage, he was still taking notes and crossing out lines. When he came on stage, 11 minutes later, he left his preparatory notes, his prepared remarks, to utter those words that changed the course of history. I have a dream. It wasn't in the script. By delaying the task of finishing the speech until the last minute, he left himself open to as many ideas as possible. And because the script wasn't set in stone, he was free to improvise. Procrastination is a vice when it comes to productivity, but it can be a catalyst for creativity. What you see in a lot of great creatives is that they start out fast, but their pace slows down toward the end. That's what I missed with Warby Parker. When they were stalling for 6 months, I looked at them and said, you know, a lot of other companies have started selling eyeglasses online. They've lost the advantage of being first. But what I didn't realize was that they were spending all this time trying to find a way to make people feel comfortable ordering glasses online. It turns out that the first mover advantage makes you stand out is mostly a myth. Consider a classic study of more than 50 product categories which compared early adopters with those who introduced different and better products. What you notice is that the first mover failure rate was 47%, compared to only 8% for the improvers. Look at Facebook, which waited to build a social network until after MySpace and Friendster. Look at Google, which waited years after AltaVista and Yahoo. It's much easier to develop someone else's idea than to create something new from scratch.
So the lesson I learned is that to be creative, you don't have to be first. You just have to be different and better. But that wasn't the only reason I turned down Warby Parker. Doubt filled their hearts. They had backup plans, which made me doubt they had the courage to be creative. Because that's what I expected creative people to look like. Outwardly, many creative people appear confident, but behind the scenes, they feel the same fear and doubt that we do. But they handle it differently. Let me show you. This is a depiction of how the creative process works for most of us. In my research, I've discovered 2 different types of doubt: self-doubt and idea doubt. Self-doubt is paralyzing. It leads to stagnation. But idea doubt is energizing. It motivates you to test, experiment, and improve, just like Martin Luther King Jr. did. So, the secret to being creative is to avoid the leap from step 3 to step 4. Instead of saying, I'm a failure, you say, first attempts are always failures. And I haven't reached my goal yet. How can I reach it? Well, it seems there's a clue in the internet browser you use. We can predict your job performance and engagement simply by knowing which internet browser you use. Some of you might not like the results of this study, but there's strong evidence that Firefox and Chrome users significantly outperform Internet Explorer and Safari users. Yes, they also stay in their jobs 15% longer, by the way. Why? It's not a technical advantage. The average typing speeds of the 4 browser groups are similar, and they have similar levels of computer literacy. It's how you use the browser. Because if you use Internet Explorer or Safari, they come pre-installed on your computer. You've accepted the default option offered to you. If you use Firefox or Chrome, you should question the default and ask, is there another option? Then be smarter and download a new browser. People hear about this study and say, wow, if I want to improve my performance at work, all I have to do is change my browser? No, it's about being the kind of person who questions the default options and looks for a better one. And if you do that well, you're prone to the opposite of déjà vu. There's a name for this. It's called fougaday. Fougaday is when you look at something you've seen many times before, and then suddenly see it in a new light. It's a screenwriter looking at a movie script that hadn't had a chance to be published for over half a century. In every previous version, the main character was an evil queen. But Jennifer Lee began to wonder what that meant. She rewrote the first chapter, reimagining the villain as a tormented heroine, and Frozen became the most successful animated film of all time. So, there's a simple message to this story. When you feel doubt, don't give up. What about fear? Creative people feel fear too. They're afraid of failure. But what sets them apart from the rest of us is their even greater fear of not trying. They know you can fail if you start a business that goes bankrupt, or fail at starting one at all. They know that our biggest long-term regrets aren't our actions, but the opposite. The things we wish we could do again, if we look at science, are the opportunities we didn't take. Elon Musk recently told me that he didn't expect Tesla to succeed. He was certain that SpaceX's first few launches would fail to reach orbit, let alone return. But it was too important to ignore the attempt. For many of us, when an important idea strikes us, we don't even bother trying. But I have good news for you. You won't be judged for your bad ideas. A lot of people think so. If you compare different industries and ask people about their biggest idea and most important proposal, you'll find that 85% of them kept quiet rather than speak up. They were afraid of embarrassing themselves or looking stupid. But imagine, creative people have a lot of bad ideas. Too many. Take the person who invented this, for example. Does it matter to you that he invented a talking doll so scary that it scared not only children, but adults as well? No. You praise Thomas Edison, the pioneer of the light bulb. If you look across the board, you'll find that the greatest creative people are the ones who fail the most because they try the most. Take classical composers, the most talented composers of all time. Why are some of them published in encyclopedias more than others? Why are their compositions recorded more often? One of the most important indicators of this is the sheer volume of work they produce. The more you produce, the more diverse you are, and the greater your chances of finding something truly innovative. Even the 3 classical music icons, Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart, composed hundreds of pieces of music to produce far fewer masterpieces. You might be wondering, how did this man become so great without putting in so much effort? I don't know how Wagner achieved it, but for most of us, if we want to be more creative, we have to come up with more ideas. When the founders of Warby Parker were trying to name their company, they needed a sophisticated and unique name, free of any negative connotations, to build a retail brand. They tested over 2,000 possibilities before finally agreeing on Warby and Parker. So if we put it all together, we'll see that creative people aren't that different from us.
They feel fear and doubt. They procrastinate. They have bad ideas. And sometimes these traits are the reason for their success. So when you see these things, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't dismiss them. And when you do, don't underestimate yourself either. Know that starting fast and finishing slow boosts your creativity. You can motivate yourself by doubting your ideas and accepting the fear of failure in the process, and that you need a lot of bad ideas to get some good ones. Creativity isn't easy, but I don't doubt it. It's the best way to improve the world around us. That's the end of our episode. See you next time, and we'll also be reading a new book. If you find this episode helpful, please subscribe and support us. Thank you for your invaluable time.